So we're about to go into a very, very busy time in terms of gaming news, releases, reveals, pricing. There's a lot of stuff that's about to hit in June. Summer Game Fest coming up, Microsoft with their event, and we could even see something from Capcom, maybe Square Enix and others. But the thing to really, I think, look out for would indeed be this $80 game. At this time, we know of one title being Mario Kart World, brand new title, I should say, not counting any kind of expansion packs on top or early access games like the baseline title. Mario Kart World has now touched $80 here, of course. And then we're looking towards Microsoft, as they have said that they will be having $80 games as select titles, which many of us figure Call of Duty is the most likely candidate to release at that price point later on this year. However, some other companies that I think many of us figured would run face first at that higher price point have kind of been a little uncertain, especially when asked about it. And it does make me think a bit more about this higher price point and if it really makes sense in the given landscape and how the publishers are, I'm sure, kicking it around behind the scenes. So let's go over that here today. So if you guys enjoy this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. So the big thing that happened recently this past week, of course, was Randy Pitchford and his comments on social media, specifically on Twitter X, where he talked about the idea of real fans will buy Borderlands 4. Now, Borderlands 4 isn't out until September. We don't know the price point on it, okay? And I think that's a big thing to remember right now, because while he was responding, and it certainly sounded like even alluding to the idea that, yeah, it's going to be 80, we haven't had that necessarily set in stone yet. Now, I will say, even let's just figure, okay, the game is 70. There will still be versions, I'm sure, above that with, I'm sure, a big box collector's edition that's hundreds of dollars or something. Those will exist. To me, it really comes down to that baseline price. Are they going to set it at $80 for that initial entry fee there, okay? So that's something to really keep an eye on. But he did talk a bit more about this, I believe, at PAX on stage. And there's an entire quote from him. And like you can see some of the video here where he does try his hardest to not necessarily be as straightforward about, hey, here's the pricing, okay, guys, because they haven't announced it yet. And typically that's part of a marketing beat for the publisher to handle. So like Take-Two, making a lot of those decisions along with 2K and stuff. And I think here he did at least mention that there is more back and forth than maybe people were expecting with some of the executives and the publishers and up in the boardrooms of like, if we go to 80, is the sticker shock worth it? Like, can we overcome that? And I do think some of these executives are thinking maybe we can't. So EA was one that I think many of us thought, you know what, they have like the stranglehold on NFL games with Madden. Obviously, that's $80 later on this year. Well, no, Madden gets revealed for 2025, and it's still 70. I say still, but hey, 4.5 years ago, that was a big backlash as well. Now, people will be relieved, I feel like, if Borderlands 4 is 70 instead of 80. That's kind of the knock-on effect of this $80 price tag that's just looming out there right now in the industry. And again, as we go into June, and there's going to be many, many titles being revealed for the first time or finally getting its release date and pricing that you're going to want to keep an eye on, okay? So I think with that, the idea that it is lessening the impact of 70, it's certainly lessening the impact of 50. Remember, not that long ago, during the PS4 and the Xbox One generation, $50 was only $10 cheaper than the quote-unquote big AAA titles that came out at $60. Now, it's $30 cheaper than that $80 price tag, which kind of puts it in the same category, as weird as it sounds now, as that $30 or $40 game back then. And you know what? If you look at the highest rated games of this year so far, as of the end of May 2025, they're all $50 or less. Clair Obscur Expedition 33, we have Split Fiction, and Blueprints, $50 or less, and those are the top 3 rated games. So the idea that a budget that, as Randy Pitchford has described, is more than twice that of Borderlands 3 is necessary to make a Borderlands 4, and then that's why you should, in turn, potentially spend $80 on the game. I don't know if that's landing with consumers like they think it is, not when you can look around and see all these other games. And also, when you see, again, EA and Andrew Wilson say, maybe not yet. Maybe we'll hang out right now at $70 as they did with investors, that they want you to tell them that the game that sells millions of copies every year because you have the license with the NFL, they want you to tell them it's going to be 80. That's the idea. It's like, yeah, we want to hear about how we're going to make more money. But he said the opposite thing, which I think was a little surprising to people. We also hear even Take-Two, while Strauss-Zelnick is like, yeah, inflation, that always comes up, obviously, budgets, etc. That's all to keep in mind. And, games, they could go up in price. It wasn't a definitive yes. We're following Nintendo. We're following Microsoft. $80 across the board. Now, GTA 6, I mean, we can all kind of pencil that in now, right? It's probably 80. Might even be more. We'll see. But the thing now, and I think this becomes very important, is the $80 price tag is getting to a position where it has kind of left the idea of impulse buy territory. Now, you might say $70 did that, but, I'm sure there are still plenty of people who walked into a store with a certain game on their mind, saw the price tag, maybe they thought a little more about it, but then they just went ahead and bought it anyway. I mean, we still see games sell tens of millions of copies, like your Call of Duty, for example, each year, without fail, really. Even if there's a ton of backlash, people making fun of it online, it still sells really well. So I do wonder, though, $80. Like, we're getting closer and closer to that $100 mark. And with the way things are right now, as you see people even having just their overall living expenses start to kind of compete more and more with their extracurricular spending, say in video games, it's like, maybe I don't need that $80 game right now. If it was $50, maybe, like Mafia: The Old Country. That got revealed as a $50 game, and according to Take-Two, one of the reasons is because it's not a vast open world. It's a game that we created with the mindset of, let's kind of rein it in a bit with the scope and focus in on what we think will make the game good or just better, and that's a more story-driven, linear style experience that maybe also doesn't span 30 to 40 hours. I'm perfectly fine with that, especially when they do I guess what you'd expect, you kind of say, is meet in the middle with the $50 price tag. I don't mind games being cheaper, but also shorter and maybe more focused. One of the more annoying things that you'll run into from time to time with some of these bigger AAA games is kind of the need to meet a quota. It's like, the game could have been a really solid, concise 20 hours, but they felt the need to get it to 30. Which means certain parts of it need to be stretched out a bit, whether it's a dungeon that for some reason takes twists and turns that are only really possible in a video game anyway and don't really make sense outside of it, or making you run back and forth across an open world constantly to just rack up the time of you traveling back and forth. It's so obvious now for a lot of us because we've experienced it so many times. I've been around the block a few times here to where it's almost distracting at times. I don't mind if the game comes in cheaper and is more concise. It's not a 50-hour game. It's a 15-hour game. But it's because we think you're going to enjoy it more. Okay, great. Let's see what you got. Now, along with the discussion and the back and forth with the pricing around Borderlands 4, Randy Pitchford says something else kind of interesting up on stage, and that has to do with the dynamic between the corporation and the consumer, in that the corporation wants the consumer to feel like they are getting the better end of the bargain when it comes to the transaction, okay? And I think that's very difficult to do, more so at 80, obviously. Especially when we have games that come out that struggle at launch, have performance issues, have to be patched like 3 or 4 times just to get to an acceptable state. And even then, you're probably turning it on and maybe seeing microtransactions still after that upfront $80 price. And then on top of that, there's just a lot of options right now out there. A lot of cheaper games, but also a lot of free games. There was an article that was written up on Bloomberg. I feel like it was from Jason Schreier, but kind of mentioned, hey, you know what? People don't really necessarily even have the time to look into or buy these $80 games because they're busy playing Fortnite. That is something you really have to keep in mind here. It's become more and more competitive, not necessarily when it comes to just game releases and trying to beat the other AAA game. It's trying to grab the attention and the screen time, if you will, of millions and millions of people right now who are just stuck on Fortnite, Apex Legends, Marvel Rivals, Call of Duty Warzone, and Roblox, etc., right? Especially with the newer generation coming up. You're kind of cycling through the same generation, the older console gamer right now, especially with like PlayStation 5 and kind of Xbox and on PC. And the younger generation is really gravitating more and more towards these free-to-play games because, yes, they are just free. There's no barrier of entry. Whereas on the other side, you raise the barrier of entry constantly. And all we're really seeing are these live service black hole games, as they've been dubbed, taking over more and more of the market share of attention. And that's a difficult thing to really be able to stack up now. So what I think is going to happen here, and what I think a lot of these publishers are going to find, and maybe they're already doing their own market research, and that's why we're not seeing EA run face first at this $80 price tag immediately like they did with the $70. Do you guys remember how fast EA was on the $70 price tag? They were quick. Take-Two, kind of the same thing, right? With NBA, they were like, yep, it's 70 now. EA had Madden 21 ready to go in December with like a next generation version of it for $10 more than the 60, making it just 70 there for PS5 and Xbox Series owners. So they wasted no time. Here, though, I mean, the newest Madden coming up is 70. They seem kind of reluctant to just pull the trigger immediately and be like, okay, everything's 80 now, despite what are some pretty expensive licensing deals there. So I feel like there is some market research that's happened or is ongoing right now, and even they're like, ooh, okay, hold on a minute. That $80 tag is kind of a deterrent right now. And when you have a game stuffed full of microtransactions, which EA is good with that, Take-Two is good at that, no shortage of those, why would you want to raise the barrier of entry for these games when you heavily rely on just active users at all times, whether it's FC 20, what would that be, 26 now, or Madden or NBA? You want to keep bringing people in as much as possible. And look, you sell a product at a higher price, you're most likely just going to sell less copies right out of the gate. That's just kind of how it ends up working out. Now, some games will be able to overcome that. As I mentioned, Madden, yeah, you know what? There are people who just buy it every year. There are people who buy Call of Duty every year. And that's kind of it. But a new IP? Good luck. Even a running IP now that's maybe not super strong, that might be tough too. Like Borderlands 4, people are really honing in on that right now because of Randy Pitchford's comments. I do wonder if that is a game that has enough pull for 80. I feel like it does, just because it's continued to sell 10 or 20 million plus units every time it's released. But also, that $80 price tag does have that knock-on effect of, you know what, if Borderlands 4 comes out at 70, it's be like a wave of relief, won't there? People will be like, oh, it's only 70. 4.5 years ago, people were like, this thing is $70. What happened to 60? That only took 4.5 years, and then the prospect of an $80 price tag lingering over us to get us to kind of flip on that $70 price point. So pay attention over the next 30 to 40 days throughout June and then into July for some of these publishers and what their strategy is when it comes to franchises. Because while I think the belief is that we're going to see a ton of $80 games, I don't actually think so. I do believe that many of these publishers understand that there is price sensitivity currently, and even on their end, maybe some concern that they could just ruin an entire 5 to 6 year plan by just marking the thing up $10 right at launch. So we'll see, but definitely keep an eye on exactly how these companies are moving throughout several events and other things that'll be happening in June. But let me know what you guys think about all this down below. Do you think we are going to see more $80 games, or is it possible that maybe what we're seeing right now out of EA, where they're a little hesitant, is a bit more common behind the scenes than we were expecting? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.